We are going to simulate the 2025 season in the SEC, and we're going to do it in a very unique way next on the College Huddle. And joining me this evening on the College Huddle, that is Daniel from Gator Truth. That is Caleb from Hogs on the Hill. Two of our SEC members of the College Huddle. Gentlemen, welcome tonight to the SEC 2025 simulation of the season. Daniel, I'll start with you. Good evening. Tell everybody who you are, what podcast you run. Let's hear it, my man.
I'm Daniel. I run the Gator Truth podcast, as you said. Going into the fourth season, started around the same time Billy Napier started at UF, so it'll be an interesting time. I'll go ahead and say I know we'll probably say it at the end, but you can find me on X at Gator Podcast and find the podcast wherever under Gator Truth on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you would like. And Caleb, it is good to see you again.
Go ahead, Caleb. Introduce yourself to everybody, your podcast, where to find you.
Yeah, I'm Caleb. I'm in year 3 now of Hogs on the Hill. Been doing this for a little bit and been through a few seasons. And you can find me, just like Daniel said, on X at Hogs on the Hill, our YouTube page, Hogs on the Hill, and then across all the social medias, Facebook, X, Instagram. We're on all those platforms at Hogs on the Hill. Can't wait to get into it.
And of course, you can find both these guys as well as all the members of the College Huddle over at thecollegehuddle.com. If you are an SEC person, scroll over to the SEC. There you'll find the links to all the SEC schools who are members of the College Huddle. Guys, and let's do this. Let's dive right into this. This is going to be a lot of fun tonight. Now, I did this on my personal podcast. Of course, I'm the host of the OHIO podcast, and it was a lot of fun to do this for the Big Ten. And I thought it's going to work on the College Huddle too. So here's the rundown of how this is going to work for all of you tonight. We took all 16 teams in the SEC. We threw them into a tournament based off of the results from last year, the regular season, I guess you could say rankings, final rankings from last season. That is how we seeded the tournament. Tonight, we're going to simulate this tournament based off this year's teams, this year's rosters, okay? The games will be simulated on a neutral field, so there'll be no home field advantage, and there'll be no neutral field in Atlanta for Georgia. Yeah, I'm a spurred Ohio State fan about that. And it'll be neutral fields, okay? We're looking at the rosters, the coaching staffs, who we think would win that matchup. And then what we're going to do is we'll allow Caleb and Daniel to choose. If they disagree, then this guy will break the tie. If they agree on the matchup, that team will move on to the next round. Gentlemen, are we ready?
Let's do this.
100%.
All right, here we go. This is the bracket, everybody. And so we're just going to start up at the very top and work our way down the bracket as we go along. The number 1 seed, the Texas Longhorns, are taking on the Bulldogs of Mississippi State. Again, this is going to be on a neutral field. This game will be played on a neutral field with this year's teams, with this year's rosters. I want to iterate that once again. Caleb, since you are closest to both of these, I will let you go ahead and choose the winner first. Daniel, you will go second. Caleb, go for it.
Yeah, unfortunately, this one's a pretty easy, quick one. Sorry, Mississippi State fans. Texas is taking this one, even with the unprovenness of Arch Manning. The state of the Mississippi State program right now, it's just nothing that gives me confidence. Yeah, I know they did some changes in the transfer portal and things like that, but they're not there yet. And with what Coach Sarkisian's built at Texas so far, even with a new quarterback, they've reloaded, retooled, and I think this is a quick, easy one for Texas.
And you know what? I've got to agree with Caleb here. as far as Texas would take this. I do like Jeff Levy, and I think in time he could have a solid program at Mississippi State, but unfortunately, they're not there yet. And just as much as they got from the portal, they definitely lost a lot to the portal. So I'm gonna say sorry to my friend Landon, who may watch this. I've got to take Texas in this one.
All right, Texas is moving on by 2 votes to 0. Texas moves on to the second round. My favorite matchup in any tournament, especially come March Madness, is always the 9-8 matchup. And here it is no different. What a game. And we get to simulate here in the first round. Texas A&M, South Carolina, the 9-8 matchup on a neutral field. Daniel, you get to go first this time.
Oh man, as with all 9-8 matchups, this can be a pretty hard to call matchup. I'm going to go with the better quarterback in my opinion here, and that's Sellers. Although I like Mike Elko and I like his defense, which could be a big difference at the same time. Sellers being a guy who took a so-so South Carolina team on the road last year to Death Valley or Little Death Valley up there in Clemson, South Carolina, to pull out a win. I just think that's going to give them a little bit of an edge. I mean, obviously, there's questions there. There's also questions at A&M, who did lose quite a bit of that great recruiting class they had several years ago to the NFL, or moving on. So it'll be interesting to see how they backload or reload some of that talent. So for now, neutral site, I'm going with the Gamecocks.
Yeah, I've got to follow suit with Daniel there in South Carolina. Texas A&M historically has a great defense. Mike Elko being a defensive head coach. Like Daniel said, I'm excited to see what he does in year 2 in that program. Um, but to Daniel's point, Lenore Sellers, the more experienced quarterback. Marcel Reed at Texas A&M last year left some to be desired in his game last year. He became the starter midseason. Had some flashes, showed his ability on the ground, what he could do, but through the air, still not utmost confidence there. Got to see him prove it to me first. And that Beamer ball is fun to watch if you're watching South Carolina. And so I think they're taking this one in what could be a close matchup if you're looking at a neutral field. But it's like they say, when you have an experienced quarterback behind under center that has been there before, been in big moments, I'm going to take South Carolina.
Gamecocks move on. 2 votes to 0. Beamer gets his matchup with Texas in the second round. All right, guys, we're going to head to Ole Miss and Vanderbilt. If you listen to the Vanderbilt quarterback, they're winning a national championship this year. Of course, the head coach at Ole Miss, he's always got something to say. So that this game might be more interesting on Twitter than it might be on the field, on a neutral field. Caleb, you get to go first with this one, man. Ole Miss, Vandy, who you got?
Yeah, this is an interesting. You got that 5-12 matchup there. Thinking about both of these teams quickly, Ole Miss loses Jackson Dart and its top target, Trey Harris, to the NFL this season. They got a new young quarterback under center that's been around a few years, but it's only 19 years old. Vanderbilt, on the flip side, Diego Pavia gets the extra year of eligibility to come back after a very interesting season for Vanderbilt last year, knocking off Alabama, kind of coming out from the basement of the SEC, if you will, from what they've been historically. Looking at this matchup, it's an interesting one, and with it being a neutral site, give me Vanderbilt with the upset. Diego Pavia, I think, confidence from how he played last season with the uncertainty at Ole Miss. Like you said, Eric Lane Kiffin always has something to say, but Diego Pavia is fiery enough. He'll dish it right back out, and I think there's some high upside for this Vanderbilt team this year, and I think they could have a chance to pull this one off.
Daniel, what do you think, buddy?
Well, I do love Caleb and picking the 12-5 upset that we see a lot in the NCAA tournament. Also, shout out to the NCAA men's basketball tournament champions for this year. Can't not bring that up while we're doing a tournament. Lots of good vibes going on in Gainesville these days for that. But anyways, I just want to disagree to kind of have some fun with it. Austin Simmons, former Gator commit, now playing for Lane Kiffin, starting there. Um, it is interesting since a few years ago I sat in Commodore Stadium to watch Florida play Vanderbilt, and I said, "Man, I got to give credit to Vanderbilt season ticket holders to come every week knowing your team's going to lose." And then what happened? Florida lost that day, and then same sentiment kind of last year. Alabama lost, but this is neutral field. It's not Commodore Stadium. Of course, anyone who's ever been up there knows there's not really home field advantage. In fact, it's generally considered to be home field advantage for the away team many times. With that said, another interesting thing on this particular matchup is Ole Miss and Vanderbilt were the cross division, I guess you could call rivals, even though it wasn't really much of a rivalry back when there were 12, 14 teams playing each other every year while everyone cycled out. So these are actually familiar foes. With that said, I've got to give a nod to Lane Kiffin on the familiar foe. And we've seen him take guys he's had for 1 year before or their first year and do something special with them. I think back to 2020 when he came into Ole Miss, no spring practice due to COVID, you know, not really having much of a fall practice, and he takes Matt Corral and that team, ends up 5-5. But in that 5-5, there was a time where he was going back and forth with Florida in the first game, went back and forth with future Alabama or future national champion Alabama. So he's done crazy things. So I just think one more crazy thing he could do here is, pull what may be considered an upset based on everything they've turned over versus what Vanderbilt's bringing back on a neutral field.
All right, so that means I get to settle this score here. It looks like. I think one of the flaws of doing it this way is it's hard to seed properly. And so that's one of the reasons why you just go with last year's results, and that's how we seeded it. But that creates some very interesting matchups in doing so, and this is definitely one of those. That being said, I cannot think that Vanderbilt could pull off another upset, Caleb. Now, they pulled off some big ones last year, but in the first round of the simulation tournament, I'm going to give the nod to Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss in this one and say they get to move on by a votes of 2-1. Give me Ole Miss, which sets up maybe, possibly a 13-4 upset. Missouri, Oklahoma, Daniel, is this where we're going to see the upset?
I Unfortunately, I'm going to say no here. Missouri had a great defense last year, returns most of it. I believe they're top 20 in the nation. And also, I don't need Skeeter coming after me once he sees this. But with that said, shout out. It's two playing that does Oklahoma, right? I'm not
Yes.
confusing it. Yeah. I've not met those guys, I don't believe. Of course, maybe I've interacted with them one time, so I do apologize if I've forgotten that. But I do think this is a time where Missouri could, at least in this round, rely on its defense. Plus, with Oklahoma, they've been so up and down under Brent Venables that it's hard for me to say, yes, for sure, they're going to pull an upset when we've seen them go from. Essentially, it reminds me of Will Muschamp's tenure at Florida. You start with about a 500 year, you have a really good high win year, and then the next year it kind of bottoms out. So until I see differently, I just see them on that same. DC finally gets a chance, and yet just cannot really get out of their own way. But I'd be happy to be wrong on that one.
Caleb, what do you say, buddy?
Yeah, for the sake of entertainment and thinking about through all the possibilities, give me Oklahoma. I
Mm.
mean, you look at it, Venerables, I don't want to necessarily say super hot seat, but his seat's getting there with the expectations in Oklahoma. You look at what they did in the offseason with the transfer portal, probably one of the biggest pickups is John Mattier coming in, taking over the quarterback spot from Washington State. One of, if not the top transfer quarterback in the transfer portal after last season. Historically, Venerables comes with a good defense, and now they have a great quarterback to kind of back that up. No knock against Jackson Arnold, who we'll talk about here in a little bit, but I think maybe this might be the key to getting this Oklahoma defense rolling on both sides of the ball, other than defense. So let's get the upset and see what Oklahoma does. I'm not sold on Missouri, not just because it's Missouri, but they lost Brady Cook. They lost several weapons on offense that they're having to replace. Historically, yes, good defense, but they've got to be able to score. And their new quarterback, Pribula from Penn State, don't really know what to expect with him. Don't know what necessarily weapons they have. And so, Drink's going to have to come out and show us something this year. But until then, give me Oklahoma getting the upset there.
Yeah, this is an interesting one, guys. I really like Eli Drinkowitz. I think he's a fantastic coach. Um, but I do think Missouri's going to take a solid step back this year. And I do think Oklahoma takes a pretty large step forward this year as well, which makes this a very even game for me. And since it's even and it's on a neutral field, give me the team I think who's going to have a little bit more momentum this year. I'm going to pick the upset. I think Boomer Sooner actually takes down the Tigers in this matchup on a neutral field. If this thing was played in Missouri, however, I think it would definitely go the way of the Tigers. And I know Skeeter's not going to like to hear this, but an old Big 12 rivalry goes to the team who owns pretty much that rivalry. Give me Oklahoma. All right, let's go to the bottom half of the bracket. Tennessee, Auburn, neutral field. Caleb, the Vols, War Eagle, buddy. Who you got?
Yeah, this one's interesting. You look at the two situations here with Tennessee. They have a spring where they lose a consensus top quarterback in Nico Maliava, leaving to go to UCLA. Auburn, on the flip side, brings in a really talented guy, Jackson Arnold, who just couldn't get there or get it done and take that next step to being the guy at Oklahoma. So maybe change of scenery. We've seen that same story many times. And a guy comes into a new situation and just flourishes and gets a kind of a fresh reset. But in this one, I just don't think that's enough for this Auburn program. They're just not in a great spot yet, in my opinion. And even with the unknown at quarterback for Tennessee, I think they've recruited well enough. They have enough weapons that I still think Tennessee comes in here and gets this done at a neutral site.
Well, we're going to have some more fun because I'm going to say it this one time. War Eagle.
Was that like a swear word, Daniel, to you?
Well, I almost threw in the real swear word in the middle of it, but I couldn't bring myself to do that.
Thank you.
With that said, besides the terrible fans at the Final Four around me from Auburn, not all Auburn fans, but the ones who had to sit in front of me and talk a lot of trash for 16 minutes, they got it back. The final 4 minutes. Chef's kiss, Anyways, don't start it, but dang sure finish it if people want to do it. But anyways, I kid around a little bit. I will say this: Tennessee's not just replacing Nico. Dylan Sampson, possibly the top back in the SEC, is being replaced. Also, Brew McCoy, Squirrel White, several other players on that offense being replaced at the same time. Now you've potentially got a starting quarterback who hasn't even gone through spring with you. So how well would he be adjusted to this Tennessee offense. And I like Josh Heupel. I think he does a lot of things well. Many times that's changing his offense to the talent. But right now, with so many unknowns, your wide receivers are unknown, your QB's unknown, your running back's unknown. Whereas I do believe a little bit more in this Auburn team. Last year, they showed flashes, didn't finish games sometimes when they did. But I think this is a time where you've got a guy who's a little bit more known commodity in Hugh Freeze's off. Well, not for in Hugh Freeze's offense, but he's running an offense where he's been there in the spring. Hugh Freeze has been known to adjust as well and probably has his best quarterback that he's had since he's been at Auburn. So I'm going to go with the upset on this one. And also, I've not picked an upset yet. So why not take that over Tennessee? And I expect a text from Michael probably within 10 minutes of him watching this.
Oh, that's great. Caleb.
I think it's you, Eric.
Oh, you're straight up going Tennessee, huh?
Yes.
Ooh. I didn't think I'd have to do this. Wow, this is a tough one. How much of a step forward is Auburn going to take in 2025? That's the question. I if this thing is in Knoxville, I take Tennessee, right? But it's not. It's on a neutral field. And this is me playing a little bit Big Ten homer here, which I know the SEC people aren't going to like, but I got to see Tennessee up close in person, and that ain't it, fellas. I'm going to take Auburn for the upset here. Give me War Eagle 2-1 in this one. I think this would actually be a great football game. All right, ooh, buddy. Talk about bad seating here, Caleb. Round 1, man. Arkansas, Alabama. Neutral field, buddy. What you got? We're gonna let you go ahead and show us your homerism here, buddy.
Oh, we talked about this before. This is just Arkansas's luck getting a bad draw here in the first round.
It is.
I'll start out with Alabama. This isn't your Nick Saban's Alabama. We saw Kalen DeBoer last year have some struggles. You could clearly tell that there's been a shift in Tuscaloosa. The upset to Vanderbilt, and then there's a change in quarterback this year. Some of the issues we saw on the defensive side of the ball for Alabama last year. One of the things that jumps out to me was the kind of back and forth and uneasiness on that defense with some of the players and the coaching staff. Guys not wanting to come out of the game, doing what they're supposed to. This is one of the few times I'll say a guy in year 2 has a hot seat because Alabama's not used to losing. And after last year, if things don't improve this year, then it's going to get very uncomfortable for Kalen DeBoer, who's won everywhere he's been. He's have a proven track record, but you've got ginormous shoes to fill here in Tuscaloosa. Jumped Arkansas. Year 6 under Sam Pittman, it's not really been what Arkansas fans have wanted. We've almost gotten there. Can't really get over the hump, between bad offense coordinator hires, the transfer portal kind of just decimating the team, being one of the top teams the past 2 years in terms of number of guys that have entered the portal. But, neutral site this season, Bobby Petrino, year 2, Taylon Green. Give me Arkansas with the upset here. I'm excited to see what Taylon is going to do under Bobby Petrino. We had one of the top offenses in the country last year, and between the 20s, struggled in the red zone a little bit, but I think they really get it figured out this year. You have a returner in a young star at running back, Braylon Russell, a homegrown kid that had flashes and helped Arkansas to a win against Tennessee last year. You've got some people that need to step up in the wide receiver room. You got experience back on the defensive side of the ball, especially on your linebacking core. If some guys can step up in the other positions on defense, I think you could be surprised a little bit by this Arkansas squad. So, in a neutral site, why not? Let Arkansas get the upset against Alabama.
I really want to go with Caleb's homerism here. And as much as spite I could say, I and probably a lot of the SEC has with Alabama, it's the DeBoer in year 2 factor, where his teams always seem to make a jump, that I'm going to just say that is just the difference here, plus the talent that's been stockpiled at Alabama. You don't have the transition year where teams are figuring out the differences between, or the team is figuring out the difference between Saban and his crew, and now DeBoer has it. So I think I'm not saying this is a blowout. I actually think this is a close game. Last year, I did appreciate seeing what Petrino brought back to Arkansas, and that was a good offense. I remember during the Oklahoma State game getting into a Twitter war with some people saying whether they win or lose, you can see that Arkansas, by saying, we're going to go hire a guy we know to be a good offensive coordinator, has paid dividends and will. And I don't think that there's not a chance Arkansas could win this, but until I see them fully take that next step, I've just got to go with Alabama on this one.
Yeah, guys, Caleb, as much as I want to pick the Hogs for you on this one, buddy, I know I know you're trying you're trying to get me, buddy. I'm sorry. We got to go with Bama on this one. 2 votes to 1, man. Alabama moves on. I think they have a really good roster this year. All right. Daniel, it's your turn, buddy. LSU the 7th seed, Florida the 10th seed.
Alrighty, let's play Homer. Woohoo! Last year, Florida finished 10th, LSU finished 7th. Florida ends up winning that game against LSU. Granted, that was in the swamp. Funny thing about this matchup, we talked about cross divisional play and always playing each other. Of course, LSU Florida has tons of thrillers over the last 25 years. And I would say generally last year, came to it. With that said, I know that we've talked about before, Florida, they return pretty much, well, they lose 2 of their top receivers. But with that said, we return Eugene Wilson, who was injured last year, who was the top receiver for Florida. Well, second receiver, I should say, behind Pearsall. 2 years ago was a freshman All-American. You also have Aiden Mizell, who was electric with a ball in his hands the whole time, along with bringing freshman Dallas Wilson, who was a 5-star, over 200 yards receiving in the spring game, and definitely looks to make an impact. Among other things, you bring back Jaden Ball, who is an all-freshman SEC running back. You have DJ Lagway, who last year, while playing injured, got injured in the Georgia game, while playing injured, beats LSU, beats Ole Miss. You return now on the offensive line, 3 guys with 3 years starting experience, plus a second-year guard starter. You have a question at right tackle right now about who will start. Looks like Bryce Lovett. But generally, you're returning a ton of production and a ton of experience on that line. A former #1 quarterback in the nation recruit who has experience from last year and should be healthy to go for the season. And on the defensive side, last year, Tyreek Sapp and Caleb Banks caused LSU problems. LSU this year replacing both offensive tackles. Garrett Nussmeier is getting a lot of hype for this season. However, he's also replacing his top receivers for last year. And I just don't know. This team with Brian Kelly has been up and down. And there's just as much as there's pressure on Billy Napier at Florida, there's just that much pressure on LSU. With that said, I'm going to go not just for being a homer, but on neutral field. I'm going to go with Florida, not necessarily just for the offensive potential, but for the fact that LSU breaking in new tackles, and you've got a defensive end that wrecked them last year, caused lots of havoc, as well as a defensive tackle. And you're returning four of your top five linebackers, all of who played significant amounts. You have two safeties. They're in their second and third year of starting, as well as experience at the corner position. Devin Moore, as long as he stays healthy, hasn't done that at all at Florida, but would be a fourth year starter. The other position, it looks like it may be Cormani McClain, who is a former top corner in the nation recruit, had some issues at Colorado, came to Florida as a walk on and has put in the work. With that said, I do think with all that combined, LSU with all the turnover, maybe it gels, maybe it doesn't. But on a neutral field, I'm taking Florida that generally has kept a core group of players together. And in year four, Billy Napier put up shut up time. I think they take down LSU.
Wow, Caleb, he really thought about that. He's trying really hard to convince us here, Caleb. You going to have revenge on your mind here, or are you going to agree with him?
Yeah, this is a tough one. Good points on both sides. Looking at this, you know, I feel like I'm leaning Florida, just because when you look at it, I think the untapped potential with DJ Lagway, you saw flashes of it last year, like Daniel said, playing through the injury. You saw the talent, and year two, get to be healthy, go through a full spring practice as the starter. You have these weapons on the defensive side of the ball, like Daniel said. You have all these returners. LSU, on the other hand, there's something that with Brian Kelly, that there's a game or two every year that it just he can't get it done. And yes, you have Garrett Nussmeier, who's, like Daniel said, been getting a lot of attention in the offseason, but those tackles are pretty important, especially in the SEC when you have to go up against that type of caliber player week in and week out on the defensive side of the ball. Neutral site, no swamp, no Death Valley, two of the tougher places to play in the SEC. Give me Florida in this one. I got to experience the swamp a couple seasons ago when Arkansas went down there. My mother-in-law is an UF grad alum, so
Good
I
lady.
guess show some love there. But give me Florida in this one to upset the Tigers.
Florida it is. Florida takes down LSU and the most overrated coach in not only the SEC but all of college football. That's right, you heard it, man. Brian
Hey,
Kelly.
maybe they should have a representative in the college huddle to defend themselves, but I guess they don't see
Yeah.
the need for that.
Yeah, there you go. All right, last game in the first round, the number 2 seed Georgia, the number 15 seed Kentucky. No, this one's not being played on the bluegrass where Georgia struggled last year. This is a neutral field. I think that probably makes the difference here, Caleb. Yes.
Yeah, I think so. I think this one's one where, um, yeah, you're losing a quarterback that's leaving. You got an up and comer that was a decently rated recruit. Mark Stoops at Kentucky's done some miraculous things down in Kentucky, but to your point, neutral site. I think to the same point we had with Alabama. I think Georgia stockpiled a lot of talent. I think this is an easy pick for me to go. Georgia takes it here.
Daniel?
First off, I want to apologize if you hear a little bit of snoring. I am currently watching my in-law's dog, and she's decided to take a nap and snores louder than I do if I don't have a CPAP machine on.
That's perfect timing because the dogs are playing the Wildcats.
Yeah, exactly. So, anyways, yeah, I think it's just a matter of Georgia's stockpiled too much talent here for the Wildcats. I think the Wildcats had peaked a year or two ago under Mark Stoops, and with that said, I also think Georgia's maybe let off the gas a little bit. Like the last few years, there's been a few things where you just watch and you're like, man, this is not a hungry Georgia team like we saw a few years ago when they won back to back titles. With that said, I think this one is probably a blowout on a neutral field.
All righty. That one, whoop, 2-0. All right, let's go back to the top of the bracket. And we're going to start with you first, Daniel. It's the number 1 seed Texas, who took down Mississippi State. It's the number 8 seed South Carolina, who took down Texas A&M. Who you got and why?
Man, we could have had 3 decent rivalries here in the quarterfinals, or yeah, had I just voted a little bit differently, but that is all right. Well, I guess if we both had voted differently with A&M, but with that said, I think just like I said with Georgia and Kentucky, I think this is a matter of Texas just has too much talent. I do think Sellers at this point is more proven than Arch Manning. I've got to see Arch Manning come out and do what he's hyped to do. Um, I've not really seen that yet, but at the same time, there's so much on this Texas team that I just don't see the 8-1 upset. Not saying Texas is unbeatable, not at all, but I do think that this is one where Carolina would be just a little bit short.
Caleb?
Yeah, I'll follow that same sentiment. I think Texas gets it done. They've got a lot of talent. You look at Arch Manning with the talent that Texas has, even if he's just an average quarterback this season, he has the chance to be much better than that. But, we don't have a ton to go off of. So saying he's an average quarterback this year, he's got a lot of weapons around him, a lot of talent there at Texas. And unfortunately, that Beamer ball and Lenore Sellers, it's a lot to go up against, even in neutral site. So Texas takes this one.
All righty, 2 votes to 0. The Longhorns move on, setting up the next quarterfinal here. We have the number 5 seed Ole Miss, who took down a pesky Vanderbilt team who got a vote. And we have the number 13 seed Oklahoma, who upset the Tigers of Missouri 2-1 with votes. Caleb, you get to go first. It's the Rebels and the Sooners.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. We talked about it. Oklahoma probably gets the win over a Missouri team that takes a step back this year. Ole Miss, gets the win, like we said, over probably a pretty tough Vanderbilt team that hangs around. But Lane Kiffin works his magic and gets it done in that one. He can develop quarterbacks decently, and they've got a talented guy. He's got to come out and show that he can run this offense, take charge in that. Oklahoma has a guy that's coming in that's very, very much hyped up. Brett Venables, seats hot this season. Oklahoma fans want to see them take that next step, and in this one, I just don't think that's going to happen. I think Lane Kiffin is going to work his magic and get the win here with Ole Miss.
And I agree with that. I believe that this is just one where Lane Kiffin does weird Lane Kiffin things. We've seen him blow games he should win. I mean, heck, he did that definitely, in my opinion, did that in Gainesville last year near the end of the season, lost to Kentucky as well. But then he also has games where he comes out and it's a team like this and he just takes care of business. I won't cite the specific game I'd reference on this out of kindness, but with that said, I'll go with Ole Miss in this one.
I like how this is going between you two. Ole Miss moves on. All right, back to the bottom of the bracket. We're going to go to the Iron Bowl here, guys. Auburn upset Tennessee 2-1 to move on to the quarterfinals, and Bama took down Arkansas 2-1 to move on to play this Iron Bowl. Dan, you'll get to go first here, man. Bama, War Eagle. It's the Iron Bowl. Who's winning it, man, on a neutral field?
Oh man, My head says Alabama. My heart says Freeze will finally be able to pull off one of these upsets that we've seen Auburn come close to and just haven't done in the last few years, whether it was Freeze or why am I forgetting the name of the coach before? I'm probably because it's that forgettable. But even he, if the guy just goes down in bounds, beats Alabama. So this is one of those teams where, one of those games where generally the talent doesn't matter, which I know is cliche, but we've seen it happen. But I will go with Alabama in this one only for I'm going to go with my head, not my heart. But who knows? Maybe Jackson Arnold does even better than I believe he can at Auburn.
Yeah. Yeah, Daniel, I thought I was going to have to use your own argument against you in this one if you picked Auburn. Yeah, that Kalen DeBoer factor in year two, Alabama taking that next step. There's a lot of pressure this year. And then on top of that, playing your rival. If he wants to make these Alabama fans happy, this is one you got to win. And I think Alabama takes care of business and beats Auburn and moves on.
All right. Roll Tide onto the Final Four. All right, Florida upset LSU, although I don't know how much of an upset that truly is, to be honest with you. Moves on, and they now get to take on the number 2 seed Georgia, who throttled Kentucky on a neutral field. This is not the same Georgia team that won back-to-back national championships. This is not the same Florida team who didn't make it to bowl games here. So, whoo, Caleb, you get to go first, buddy. Are you gonna make Daniel happy? You're gonna make Daniel mad here. Let's see how you're gonna play this one.
Yeah, this one's an interesting one to think about, because you look at Georgia, to the point of, the past couple seasons, people are saying the Kirby Smart's teams, maybe did they lose their edge a little bit? Did, are they playing with that fire that, we normally see? You saw that a few games last year. Think about Texas. They went down into Austin, gets that win. But on the flip side of that, some of the losses they had last season. Florida on the flip side, you look at Billy Napier, a lot of pressure to make that next step. You got extremely talented quarterback in DJ Lagway. We don't really know what Georgia has this year. You got a lot of weapons, a lot of continuity, a lot of experience on the Florida side. Give me Florida with the upset here.
Woo!
I need to see Kirby come out and have these guys fired up and ready to come back and play that Georgia football that we've seen them play over the past few years, but it seems like they took a step back the past couple of seasons.
And you know what? Obviously, I'm going to agree with Caleb here. I'm going to make an argument that sometimes I roll my eyes at, but dang it, I'm playing Homer right now. And that is, if you look back at the game last year before Lagway goes down with injury, Florida is up. Now, I know this game is on a neutral field, and that is very new to this matchup. But with that said, I think that's also with a freshman DJ Lagway making one of his first starts. And this year, of course, he's won a few big games. He has that experience. And I also will go with something I didn't say before. Despite last year there being an announcement that Russ Callaway was being promoted offensive coordinator, we did not see any of his fingerprints on the offense. Well, Florida, for the second year in a row, made the same announcement. So, what many people are speculating, and I've seen it thrown around, is perhaps Russ Callaway, a guy who called a number one passing offense in the FCS years ago at Samford, coached a Walter Payton Award winner at Samford. For those that don't know, that is the FCS version of the Heisman. Now he's in the big leagues. He's got DJ Lagway, and he's got all these weapons around Lagway. So, if indeed Billy Napier is passing on some of that play calling, you're talking about offense that finished 50th, 60th in scoring, but still, even after Aiden Warner took over, went toe to toe with Georgia for most of that game. It was pretty close, even with 5 minutes left. Now you're having it with a DJ Lagway, and you're having it with potentially a more explosive offense plus a defense that kind of found its way the last 3-4 games of the season. I think that's enough to say Florida here would pull the upset. And I understand it would still be considered an upset since Florida's not beaten Georgia since 2020. In a way, you could say Florida's due for the win.
Okay. There you have it. You guys know the SEC more than me. Okay. That means our final four is Texas, Ole Miss, Alabama, and Florida. Let me ask this question before we simulate these two games, and then we decide a champion here, the SEC for 2025. Out of these four teams, is there any team that didn't make the Final Four that you think you would substitute in for one of these four teams if indeed you had to pick four from the SEC to go to the college football playoff? I'll start with you, Caleb.
This is a tough one. I think one of the teams you've got to throw up there, even though they lost their matchup, is LSU. Just with who they are historically, they're always one of the top teams in the SEC and in the country. Yes, it's Brian Kelly, but he still gets the team there. I think you could see them thrown in there. Even potentially Texas A&M. It depends on a lot how Marcel Reed develops over the offseason. Can he find a passing game this season? So those are two potential teams I could see, as much as it pains me to say those two programs, but those are two that I could see potentially being added in here.
Who would you take out if you're going to add one of them?
Looking at these finalists, for me, in my opinion, the weakest one has to be Ole Miss. If you just look at some of the things compared to these other teams, between Texas and Alabama having the stockpile talent, Florida having the returning quarterback, some uncertainty there at Ole Miss having to replace some pieces. That's who I'd have to take out.
Okay. Daniel, do you have an opinion on that?
I like what Caleb said about Texas A&M, and if Reed develops, and also if Mike Elko takes that defense to the next level and really be the shutdown defense that we've seen him develop at various stops in his coaching career. And if they get an explosive offense to go with that, the sky's the limit. With that said, who would I take out? Well, I'm going to say this just to possibly upset some people. I'm going to take out Texas because that's the bracket they're in. They would have been there and taken them out. So there you go, Longhorns. You'd be replaced by the Aggies.
Okay.
And I also say this, I have family that are employees of Texas Agricultural and Mechanical University.
Nice. All right, guys, here we go. Let's play the final four. Daniel, you get to go first. It is Texas who took down Mississippi State and South Carolina to get here. They are the number 1 seed taking on the number 5 seed Ole Miss, who took down the number 12 seed Vanderbilt and the number 13 seed Oklahoma. It's the Longhorns. It's the Rebels. Who you got?
Just for kicks and for the fun on Twitter, it would be, let's go with Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin, because who would not enjoy that firestorm if he actually took them to the top of the SEC and got over the hump?
Caleb?
Yeah, this one's a tough one because can't stand the Longhorns and the burnt orange. Equally as much that powder blue it over Ole Miss is just tough as well. But yeah, you can't let Texas come in 2 seasons in a row and have some success in the SEC. So let Lane Kiffin work his magic and get the upset here.
All right. Ole Miss it is. Ole Miss pulling off the upset. They go to the SEC Simulation Championship game. Who will be their opponent? The number 6 seed Alabama Crimson Tide. Caleb, they took down your number 11 seed Arkansas. They also took down rival and number 14 seed Auburn to get to this point. They're going up against Daniel's Florida Gators, who took down LSU in an upset, and also Georgia in an upset. It's Bama. It's the Gators. Caleb, who you got?
Another interesting one here. You look at it, we've had these arguments. We've already talked about these two teams in depth and multiple times. Florida, the experience. Alabama, the stockpile talent. Year 2 in Kalen DeBoer. Does he take that next step forward here? Billy Napier, pressure to get to win and take that next step here. This is a really tough one when you're looking at these two teams. But sorry, Daniel, I've got to go with the Tide in this one. DeBoer takes that next step. He has a lot. He knows that pressure he's got behind him at Alabama and that fan base. So Alabama gets the win here.
Interesting. As I'm sure I'm getting a message from Longhorn Republic right now for my picks. Anyways,
They're good guys. They're good guys.
They are. I appeared on their podcast last year. They haven't invited me back. I don't know why. They had a very good time with our game last year. But with that said, I can't not be a homer at this point. I've already sold it out. So you know what? I'm going to say maybe Alabama's quarterback room does not get it together. Maybe they continue to have their ups and down struggles. We talk about Alabama losing to Vanderbilt last year. They also struggled against South Carolina, and arguably, if South Carolina had a little bit better kicking situation and was later in the season, maybe that game goes the other way. I watched that in Knoxville, Tennessee, actually. So yeah, you never know what could happen. With that said, I'm going to go with the experienced quarterback here, so I can have a somewhat non-biased take on this one, and also just yes, there's lots of pressure to win, but I also think there's a lot more returning production at Florida, and I could be wrong about that, but especially there with a guy like DJ Lagway, who really did will Florida to win in games they probably shouldn't have won last year. So with that said, homer as it is, I'm going with Florida Ole Miss for this final.
All right. So Daniel knows this already. Florida is my dark horse to upset the apple cart this year. I do believe that Florida is going to be the team that really surprises a lot of people. That being said, I also think Alabama is like a woman who has a scorn to settle, and hell hath no fury like a woman scorn, and that is where I believe Alabama is at this year. So I'm betwixt between the two, and so that being said, I've already upset you, Caleb. It's time to upset Daniel. I'm going to go ahead and take the Crimson Tide to move on to the SEC championship and to set up the Alabama Ole Miss SEC simulated championship game.
So, real quick, all I heard you say was Alabama is women. That's all I heard. I stopped listening after that. So, I mean, that's cool. Just Bama factor. Just he's texting you this time for that comment, not me.
I believe Caleb DeBoer is a legitimate, really good coach. I also believe that last year was a situation, given Nick Saban leaving and the turnover of the roster and things, where he had to coach with kid gloves. And what I am hearing coming out of Tuscaloosa is that the gloves came off after the end of the season, and the real Caleb DeBoer showed up. and the roster has responded very well to that. Why he didn't just do that from day one, I'm not sure. I guess he was worried about losing the rest of the roster, possibly. I mean, he did lose he lost 3 guys to Ohio State. Shout out to Nick Saban for some development there for us. But that's where I'm at with Alabama. I think the roster is really good. Obviously, you both have mentioned that. I think Caleb DeBoer is going to be adjusted to the SEC much better, and I just think that Alabama is set up to respond in such a way this year that they're going to play angry a lot, and I think that they're going to play better as they're angry. But they do have one thing that they're going to have to overcome, and that is they do have a new starting quarterback, which both these teams do, by the way. So, that being said, Ole Miss, Auburn, Daniel, you're up first. Who's going to win the SEC in this simulation championship game?
Based on the teams you just announced, I'm calling Auburn.
Did I say Auburn? Oh,
yes.
My bad. I meant Bama.
And now Bama Factor has sent you another text.
My bad, guys.
But anyways, I'm already in too deep on this one. You know what? Former Gator commit Austin Simmons last year came in for a little bit when Dart got injured, did well with what he was asked to do against Georgia. That was not the easiest task this year. By the time he's gone here, his road has been pretty good, I would say, as far as going through Vanderbilt, Oklahoma, taking on Texas, where Alabama, they've taken on the 11th seed, 14th seed, 10th seed, and now they finally face a seed that's really close to them. I'm going to go with the battle hardened, based on this tournament, Ole Miss Rebels, and also what would be more fun than Lane Kiffin winning an SEC title on Twitter, especially over the Alabama team that he had such a not harmonious breakup with, we can say, when he left. So in a way, you're talking about Alabama are women and they're scorned and all that. Well, you got scorned Lane Kiffin wanting to make a statement, always hearing about how he can't win the big one. Well, here's the big one. This time, let's just say for kicks and giggles, he pulls it off. And I'll stick with the argument I made about Alabama in the Florida game. Maybe the new quarterback doesn't get it together. Maybe some of the new talent starting doesn't gel. Granted, same could be said for Ole Miss, but at the same time, at least I've seen Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss take a whole bunch of new stars or a whole bunch of new guys to him and actually do things. So with that said, for pure chaos reasons, sorry, Bama Factor. I'm sorry all the things Eric's already said about you, but I'm picking Ole Miss.
Yeah, this is an interesting SEC championship game. At the end of the day, sorry, Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss. I think your magic's run out. Alabama, the kids' gloves have came off, as Eric alluded to earlier. Kalen DeBoer, year 2, makes that jump, gets this roster ready to get back to the Alabama standard of winning. And what comes with the Alabama standard of winning other than SEC championships? So Alabama, I think, takes the win here. Eric, you get to decide who wins this here.
Oh, great. Well, according to Daniel, I'm going to choose Auburn. So,
I mean, why not?
At least I got the right state, apparently. No, this would be a very interesting SEC championship game. For all the factors, Daniel, that you lay out there. That Lane Kiffin is such an interesting human being. I guess is the best way to put that. Um, and the Bama fan base is an interesting fan base to work with and deal with. So that being said, Whew.
Chaos.
I really think in my heart of hearts, Bama's going to do it this year. I think they're gonna kind of, even though I see, that's the thing. I don't want to, because I don't think Caleb DeBoer is anywhere close to Nick Saban. But it's the better roster. So I'm going to take Bama. I'm going to go with Bama. Yep. Sorry, Daniel. It is going to be an Alabama championship.
And now
And
all the
Bama
SEC
factor, you
fans
don't have to
logged
email
off.
me now. What was that, Daniel?
I said now all the SEC fans have logged off, except for Bama Factor, who logged off the second you called Bama women, and they've already sent that 5-paragraph email talking about how dare you, with just the Greta Thunberg gif over and over and over again.
Somehow I believe that most Bama fans are probably not Greta Thunberg fans, but I digress. This was very interesting, guys. Your overall thoughts of simulating the conference this way? Good, bad, indifferent? What do you think, Caleb?
I think it brings a unique perspective because you're going, seeding wise off how this team finished, but you're looking at the flip side of that, who has a better roster this season. So I think that brings two interesting factors, kind of contradicting factors, unknown factors that you have to pit against each other. And that's a very unique way to look at things, and I think it's a great perspective compared to we just look at, oh well, this is how this team finished last year, or oh last year's last year. Let's see what this new roster and what these teams look like this year. So it brings the best of both worlds, and it makes for an interesting, fun discussion.
Daniel, you want
Oh,
to sum it up?
I definitely agree, and it's interesting, as a Gator fan who is truly in the full wait and see on Billy Napier. You see we've talked about it. You see the potentials there. Like if you took away everything, the name, and you just said, hey, there's a team that's returning, 10 plus years of starting experience with a All American center, number one recruit at quarterback, all freshman SEC running back, and all the other accolades, and you're returning like 7 stars on defense. Anyone in the SEC is saying that team's probably winning the tourney, if you're blind picking. But because of where Florida's been the last few years, there's that question of can they get there or whatnot. So I'm giving a little bit from my perspective, but also showing how this tournament bracket does break down. Because with that, we talked about Tennessee, and I love Josh Heupel, but there's a big question about they're replacing all their skill positions, and the quarterback potentially is a guy who wasn't even there for spring practice. So that's something that maybe Heupel pulls a rabbit out of his hat, and they're winning 9-10 games. Michael and I talked about that on a podcast recently. Or you could win none in this tournament just because of your opening matchup. So I really enjoyed it. I had lots of fun. I don't know how much you guys had with me, cracking jokes and probably upsetting the entire College Huddle SEC base, except for you, Skeeter. I said nothing about Mizzou. And Michael, I'm sorry I picked against you, but you're still my boy.
Better or worse than watching the 2026 NCAA EA Sport game simulate the conference? Better or worse than that? I think this is better. Yes.
Oh, definitely better in my
100%.
opinion. Yes.
Okay. Well, that's what we're aiming for. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. If you've made it to this point of the episode, you are a diehard, and we appreciate that. Let us know what you think about what we think down in the comment section below. That ought to get very interesting as we worked our way through this. All those who disagreed with our picks and everything else, but challenge yourself. You and some two other people. Do it, man. Create a bracket. Base the seating on whatever you want. Simulate it out. It's not as easy as it looks because sometimes you get in there and you really start second guessing yourself, and because we have no data to go off of. This is complete speculation based off season roster, roster making, roster development, I guess you could say, past history of coaches, what they've done, your opinion of these teams, given those factors, and all of that clashes together in a tournament where matchups are king. Because we had teams losing in the first round that you guys mentioned could possibly be college football playoff teams in A&M and LSU. So keep that in mind. Again, Daniel, go ahead and tell everybody where they can find Gator Truth and follow you, my man.
Yep. Gator Truth, as it says here on the Chiron. You can find me on X at Gator Podcast. You can also find us at Gator Truth on YouTube and anywhere that you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple, wherever you do so. And hopefully this year I will start up more social media. I keep getting encouraged by our FSU affiliate, Plant the Spear. Jesse keeps kind of nudging me. Do the Facebook, do the Instagram. So who knows? Maybe we'll get that started up as well. If anything, I'll hook it up and be like, hey, my wife, take lots of crazy photos of me at these games.
There you go.
Florida's got lots of podcasts. I'm the only one crazy enough to have attended every single Billy Napier game in person, home, away, and even in Vegas. So with that said, definitely check it out. Always a good time, and go Gators.
Caleb.
Yeah. Hogs on the Hill, our primary form you can find YouTube, but also Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, across social medias. Hogs on the Hill, you can find us there. Spotify app podcast, wherever you get your podcast, you can find us. It's going to be interesting for year 6 of Sam Pittman. Much like we've talked about with Florida and Billy Napier, there's a lot of pressure building up with this fan base that wants to see a next step, and some just already want to see a new face at the top. So it's going to be an interesting season. But yeah, come check us out. Come join us for our live shows, and woo pig.
Fantastic. Thank you both very much. Make sure you follow the College Huddle YouTube channel. We also have a Facebook page if you like to do that, and a Twitter account as well at College Huddle. So check all of those out if you like. And please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And like we said, let us know what you think about what we think down in the comment section below. Till next time, guys, go woo pig and go Gators. What is it? Gators?
Right over left. Of course, it's the reverse, so I guess I gotta do left over right to make it look right over left.
Take care, everybody. Till next time.